My parents kicked me out of the house when I was 16 to make room for my sister's newborn. I posted online about their neglect of me, and my father begged my wealthy grandparents, who had disowned him, to disinherit him when they threatened to do so. I'm 16 and just a week ago, with no party, no celebration, and no happy birthday from my parents, I was kicked out of the house. The reason behind this was my sister Amanda, 22, who was almost their favorite and always had been for some reason, was 7 months pregnant. Since we had a house with 4 bedrooms, my parents sat me down on my birthday morning and told me that they now wanted me to move in with my aunt so that there would be room for the new baby. My parents had never cared about me and always treated me with indifference, but even I was shocked this time. I hardly expected them to do anything for me, but they still let me down. They were so serious throughout the whole conversation that I didn't even think for a second that they might be joking, or that it was some kind of pathetic attempt at a practical joke. They explained to me that they needed the new room and that I was obviously old enough to move out. We just sat there in silence as they told me that they would still cover all my expenses and make sure I was fed and clothed until I turned 18, but that they just couldn't let me live with them anymore. I didn't want to argue, but I did ask why they couldn't use the guest room as a baby's room, and after a moment's hesitation they told me that they had let Amanda's boyfriend stay there. To recap, my parents have their own room, my sister and her boyfriend have a room, and her baby will have its own room. Amanda is not at home, and I can tell that this is on purpose so that she doesn't have to witness this and feel guilty. My sister and I have never got along because of our age difference, but she hasn't been mean to me. We've mostly kept things polite, but if she really wants me out of the house so that she can take care of her new baby and boyfriend, then maybe she's not the person I thought she was. I was disappointed, even more so because it was my birthday, but I said nothing and just agreed to leave now. I realized that my parents were hopeless and that I could not make them love me, and I accepted this fact. After they told me they wanted me to move out and live with my aunt, I went back to my room and started packing. They helped me pack, but I think it was just so they could say they helped me. After I finished packing, they quickly drove me to my aunt's house. They were happy to chat with me on the way, but didn't notice that I wasn't responding and just stared out the window in silence. They dropped me off at the door and didn't even hug or kiss me before leaving. My aunt welcomed me with joy because she really liked being with me. As far as I know, she loved me even more than my real parents. I talked to her for a while, and then told her that I was very disappointed with what my parents had done. She was a bit taken aback by this and asked me to repeat what I had told her. So I retold everything that had happened that morning, and her smile immediately turned into a frown. She didn't say anything to me, but picked up her phone and said she needed to make a call before going into another room. For a while I heard nothing, but then I heard my aunt arguing loudly on the phone, which was unusual, because she rarely shouted at anyone and always spoke in a very soft voice. Then she went back into the room with a red face and still looked very angry. I learned that it was apparently my parents who had made her so angry, because my father, her brother, had told her that it was actually me who had suggested the arrangement for the sake of the child, and that I would be happy to move out of my childhood home and move in with my aunt, which is why she had agreed to take me in, because she could see that I had never really liked living with my parents, and it wasn't too strange for her that I would suggest this, because at the time my father was trying to convince her to take me in. She was a single woman in her 30s with no plans to get married or have children, so having me live with her was like having an extra roommate, and she didn't have to worry about my living expenses here, because everything I needed was paid for by my father. My aunt likes me and she thinks it was my idea to live with her, so she agreed to the arrangement. But now that she knows the truth, she called my father and confronted him, because what they did was terrible and she had to teach them a lesson. After the phone call, she was very angry, and so was I, because I don't think other kids my age encounter this kind of thing very often. I always knew they preferred my sister, but this is a bit much. They even deceived my aunt to cover it up, because they knew how terrible it was. They really chose to give up the guest room to Amanda's boyfriend, who is in his 20s, has a job, and lives in his own apartment. If they wanted to maintain the relationship, Amanda could easily move in with her boyfriend, but my parents insisted that she stay at home because they wanted to be close to her, and were even willing to sacrifice my comfort to keep her close to me. I was so hurt that I decided to go online and expose my parents' behavior. I didn't know if my aunt would agree, so I waited until she left the room to take a nap, then took out my phone and wrote the whole thing down without thinking and posted it. I not only mentioned what happened that day, but also that my parents had never treated me fairly, and that I had always been treated like a second-class citizen, even in my own home. As I typed all this out, I sort of broke down. The post not only exposed my parents, it was also a bit emotional, and I cried when I posted it. Afterwards, I switched off my phone for a while because I was afraid of the repercussions. After about an hour, I tried to read a book, but I couldn't concentrate. Then my aunt woke up and rushed into the living room, where I had been sitting since arriving at her house. She calmly asked me if I had posted. I told her the truth that I had, and that was it, no further discussion. So I turned on my phone and found that several people in the family had seen the post. I received many text messages from my parents and sister. At the same time, many relatives commented and said they were on my side. Some even sent me messages saying that they would be there for me whatever I needed. It lifted my spirits and made me feel better. It wasn't until I read my parents' messages that I realized they were full of hatred and anger. Apparently, they weren't happy with what I had done and demanded that I delete the post. My dad's message said a lot of things about me, and it hurt, but it wasn't surprising when it said that he wished I had never been born. My mother's text was similar, the only slight difference being my sister's text. She didn't say much, just that she wanted to talk to me in person if possible, and that was it. I didn't know what to say to all of this. I was just overwhelmed by so many people who needed a response, so I put my phone away again and didn't listen to anyone for the next few days, but I blocked my parents because I didn't want to speak to them anymore. I know legally they have to keep sending money until I turn 18, but other than that I don't see any reason to speak to them again. My aunt has no problem with this either, and if my father tries to contact her she doesn't tell me. We pretend nothing has happened, which means she's on my side and supports what I'm doing, and that's enough for me. It's all the support I've wanted or needed for the past week. I have hardly had any contact with my parents, but today as I was leaving school, they appeared outside the school. They looked angry. My friends know about the situation between me and my parents and between my parents, so they walked with me outside surrounding me like human shields so that I didn't have to interact with them. But if I didn't want to interact with them, they kept shouting my name and I had to respond. I walked straight up to them and told them that I didn't want anything more to do with them, but they wouldn't listen and told me that I had to come home with them right away. I didn't understand why they wanted me to go home with them all of a sudden, when they had made it clear in the past that I was not even a priority for them. I thought they just wanted to save face and their reputation as a family, so I told them that I wasn't going with them unless they told me what was going on. I wanted to know why they were suddenly like this. On the one hand they seemed angry, but on the other hand they still wanted me to come home. They told me they didn't want my friends to hear this, so I told them to back off a bit so I could talk to them in private where my friends couldn't hear. My parents told me that they had come here to take me back because I hadn't answered any of their calls or texts, and they needed me back so they could get their inheritance. They still explained that after I posted that post, almost everyone in the family knew about it, even my grandparents. My grandparents are well off and they threatened my dad that if they continued to treat me like this then he would lose his inheritance. They were told that whatever my parents were supposed to inherit would end up in my aunt's hands if they didn't try to make peace with me, treat me better and make sure I was loved and cared for, because she looked after me even though she didn't have to, and my father couldn't afford to lose his inheritance, which was a significant amount. My parents had their own decent total income, but I knew that if I were them, I probably would have fought for the same for myself. The only difference is that I would have been smart enough not to make it seem like I was doing them a favor by saying they would take me back because they weren't doing it for me, but for themselves, and even then they didn't have the common sense to at least act like they wanted me to live with them. So I said I didn't care if they got the inheritance or not and left, ignoring them and not listening to them finish even though they were yelling at me to come back. I took the bus back to my aunt's house and told her what had happened at school. She seemed annoyed too, and to make sure it didn't happen again, contacted a lawyer so that we could sort out my custody. Of course my parents still had custody of me, and if I wanted to live with my aunt that would have to change. I also called to thank my grandparents for trying to resolve the situation, but I told them that I really didn't want to live with my parents anymore. After a few days with my aunt I finally felt free. Living with my parents was suffocating. I always hoped that things would change, but they never did. My grandparents don't live in the same city, so we don't see each other very often, but whenever there's a family gathering at the holidays, my parents always behave best so they don't find out how I'm treated at home. I'm not abused, but it's more like a superficial indifference and avoidance. Everything looks fine, But if people spend a few days at my parents' house with me, they'll see that they mostly pretend I don't even exist and only care about my younger sister. After she got pregnant, things got even worse. I was completely pushed aside, so I told my grandparents about it, and they assured me that if I wanted to live with my aunt, they would make sure that if my parents gave up their rights, then they would make sure that everything I needed would be paid for by them. I was happy after that conversation because things were finally turning around, but it didn't last long because just a few hours ago I received an email from my dad, and although it wasn't hateful or mean, it was just disappointing. He said that I didn't need to post what happened online and make it so public because anyway what happened would have reached my grandparents through me, but now my grandparents are angry at them, and they have to deal with the hatred of their relatives, and it seems unfair that they are being excluded. He told me that even some of his colleagues found out about it because the post was public and because he was tagged in the post it appeared in their feeds as well. It doesn't look good for his work image and all I did was bring a lot of unnecessary drama to them, according to me, so Ida posted about how my parents demanded that I leave home on my 16th birthday and move in with the aunts because my sister is pregnant and they need my room to take care of the baby. Update 1. So before I explain what happened, thank you all so much for taking the time to comment on my post. Your kind words mean so much to me. So now to answer some of the questions, many of you seem to be concerned about why I didn't leave my parents' house before, why I waited for them to ask me to leave, especially as my grandparents and aunt seemed willing to help me. The reason is that I wasn't treated cruelly. As I said in my original post, I have never been treated so badly, but I was just ignored and not welcomed, which is also a kind of abuse, but for me I was just glad that I was not beaten or spoken to, and I still had a roof over my head and food to eat, so I kept telling myself that I was doing well and didn't think that really feeling love or anything was important to me. I didn't realize that I was being neglected because it had become commonplace for me. As for why I didn't ask my family for help, I just didn't want to burden them. I was also afraid of what would happen if they refused to help me. Somehow, my parents found out about it and it would have been very detrimental to my situation at home because my parents care a lot about appearances and things like that. That's why I kept everything to myself, tried to face it alone and suffered in silence. My aunt didn't offer to take me in on her own initiative because she didn't want to offend my parents, and she wasn't even sure that I would want to live with her. So we didn't do it before, but now that things have organically developed, I think everything is developing for the best. It's a bit late, but better late than never. She is negotiating with a lawyer to transfer my guardianship to her, and it is a difficult task to convince my parents to give up their rights, because now inheritance is at stake, but even if this matter goes to court, I know that my grandparents and my aunt will support me. My aunt has always been concerned about me because she realizes how unvalued I feel in my own family, and she feels bad that she has never tried to talk to me because she felt it wasn't her business, and letting things continue. At least the air is clear between me and my family now, and I feel much better about the future. Then there's my younger sister. So in my original post, I mentioned that she texted me to tell me that she wanted to meet me face to face. If it's possible, I'd like to talk to her face to face, but I don't know what to say to her, so I didn't reply to her text. She has always been nice to me and acts like my parents. She kept her distance from me for most of my life, but was usually friendly if she had to speak to me. I think she wanted to get rid of me so that her boyfriend and child could live with her and our parents. Now that she has started treating me badly and showing her true colors, I haven't replied to her either. Our relationship is very strange, tense and strained, but I still prefer her to my parents because whenever we speak, she is nice to me, and it is not her fault that my parents prefer her. So when she texted me again 3 days ago asking me to visit her, I decided to call her and ask her why she wanted to see me. I wasn't planning to go home, I thought she would be at home, but to my surprise, she told me that she currently lives with her boyfriend and is not feeling well and cannot go out. So she hoped that I would visit her so that we could discuss everything that has happened in the family. She told me that she had a lot she wanted to talk to me about, and out of curiosity I did go to see her. She first apologized to me because she knew that our parents were biased and never favored me, but always ignored my achievements to celebrate hers, and I was always the least popular child, but she never took any remedial measures, just feeling that it was not very convenient to talk to our parents about it, so she just let things take their course. Since I seemed to be happy with the way she treated me, she didn't feel the need to say anything. Now she realizes what a mess it is and wants things to change, so she apologizes to me. She also tells me that our parents never discussed living arrangements with her at all. She was shocked to learn that they had kicked me out in order to take care of the newborn baby and her boyfriend, because she had no idea that such a thing had happened. She had never even asked for this. Her plan was to live with our parents until the baby was a few months old and then move in with her boyfriend. She wanted to move out earlier, but stayed because of my parents' insistence. However, after I posted that, she realized that this could not continue and moved out within a week. She had a huge fight with her parents about her moving out, as they thought it was the wrong decision. Now they don't even speak because she was accused of being ungrateful and selfish, which she is not at all because she never promised my parents anything, they just assumed it, so all this drama was ultimately futile because my parents ended up losing both children. At least she apologized to me and admitted that she was a bad sister and a bad person, and I forgave her because I don't think choosing to be cold and unforgiving towards me helped. We talked it out and she told me the same thing my aunt had said, that she would support me from now on no matter what, and that made me very happy. It's been less than a week since I first posted, but I haven't heard back from my parents since that email, so I guess they've given up on trying to change my mind. I'm pretty sure my grandparents had something to do with it, because they did call to tell me that my parents would leave me alone and I didn't have to worry about them showing up at my school or emailing me again. I didn't tell them about the email from my dad, so I guess my parents and grandparents must have talked about something I didn't know about, but I'm pretty sure my parents have given up now. Today my aunt told me that my parents have agreed to give up their parental rights, that the paperwork and other things will be done soon, and that she will soon take over my guardianship. I feel a mixture of emotions. I'm happy that I finally have a family where I don't often feel unwanted and unneeded, but I also feel a bit empty and sad. I feel strange that it's finally happened, but it's for the best and it's what I want. Update 3. Okay everyone, it's been a few weeks since my aunt took over, and she's now my legal guardian, so I'm happy about that. I also found out that the reason my parents gave up custody of me was because after I told my grandparents that I didn't want to live with them, they told my parents that they would either lose their entire inheritance or they could keep 50% of what they were originally due and give up custody of me and promise to never bother me in any way. I think we all know what my parents chose. I wasn't surprised and I don't care now because it made me feel like I got away with something. Although my parents tried to make up with her before her due date, she now needs some time for herself. So she told them that she needs her own space and they need to stop bothering her every day. I can't help but laugh at how they messed up their own family, but anyway, I'm happy to be with my aunt, and that's what matters.